welcome back to my channel. It's Sanju. I hope you guys are all doing well. I wanted to get on here and do a video wrap up of the books that I have read so far this year. I know that most people do these in June or July, but I'm a little bit behind schedule because I just moved and I have been really struggling to find time to film videos. I am getting around to this just now, and I am not going to be talking about the books I read in August. I was also debating not talking about the books I read in July, but because I've already gone through the entire month of July, I decided I would just do my wrap up here to include those books in July, and when I do my wrap up at the end of the year, I will only do the books I read from August until the end of December. Without further ado, let's get into the 30 books I have read so far this year, and I will be going over them in chronological order. Okay, so the first book that I read this year was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I actually really enjoyed this book. It was a 5-star for me, so I started off the year with a 5-star read, which is always really exciting. I really liked the characters. I loved the growth. I loved the exploration of grief in the book. I thought the concept was really exciting. And I also thought it was really interesting that they fell in love when he was younger and she was older, but then when they meet in the future, she's younger and he's older. I just thought that was really cool. And I also really loved the familial relationship between Lemon and her aunt, and the relationship between Lemon and Ewan, I believe it's pronounced. I googled it and it says it's a Welsh interpretation of the name John and can be pronounced Yuan or Ewan, so I'm probably still butchering that, but I really liked his character and his relationship with cooking. I really loved how they inspired each other. I loved getting the little tidbit at the end of the book where you find out that the reason she got into her career was because of something he said in the taxi, whereas the reason he's into his career the way he is because of the things that she did for him. I just thought it was a really beautiful love story, and there was a lot of really good quotes in that book. I just really enjoyed the way that the writer described the environment and the characters and the story, and thought the themes that they touched on were done really well. And overall, I'm excited to get into more of Ashley Poston's writing. And if you are a little bit curious about more of an in-depth review on that book, or maybe some of the quotes or things that really stood out to me, I am planning to do a video at the end of the year about all of my 5-star reads from the year, where I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about the things I really liked about the book, specific plot points or quotes and things like that. So that was book 1. Okay, so the second book I read this year was the final book in the Chestnut Springs series by Elsie Silver. It is called Hopeless. It is a story of Bo, the last brother, who is in like the special forces kind of deal, and his love interest is Bailey Jensen, who is the youngest of the Jensen siblings, and she runs the bar in town. I actually did an entire reading vlog on this book, so if you are interested in my in-depth thoughts on the novel, then I will leave that linked down below. But I really don't have any strong feelings about it. It was probably my least favorite book in the Chestnut Springs series. I really didn't like the characters. I wasn't really rooting for them. I kind of had no real interest in the story, unfortunately. I do still think it was written great. Like, I really enjoy Elsie Silver's writing, and I do love Chestnut Springs. I liked seeing some of the other characters. She definitely still knows how to write a spy scene. I do find her writing just comforting and familiar. I am still excited to get into her previous series before Chestnut Springs, as well as the series that comes after Chestnut Springs. But once I kind of wrapped up with Hopeless, I was ready to leave the world of Chestnut Springs behind. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. The third book I read, which was starting the books that I read in the month of February, was the final book in the Inheritance Games trilogy, The Final Gambit. I really enjoyed this book. I felt like it was a good and solid ending to the trilogy. I'm not usually into YA books at this point, only because I feel that some of the characters are immature for me. I do enjoy some YA series. I think that when there's an emphasis on the age of the characters being young, like high school YA, I just don't really think I find those kinds of stories of interest to me anymore. However, I do okay with YA where the characters lean more on the late teen side, like 17 and up. So I do think that I enjoyed the Inheritance games because although the characters are younger, it did not focus on that. It was more on the entire plot with, you know, Avery and the boys and solving the riddles and trying to figure out the mystery. And I really feel like this was a 5-star series for me. I was kind of shocked because it's not generally in the genre that I would read. I don't really think I would classify this as a fantasy. It was more of like a mystery. And there was some thrilling elements. There is a love triangle. That's kind of it. I did like some of the moments we got with Avery and the boys, but overall I really enjoyed that it wasn't super romance heavy. I did note that I found it a little bit annoying and inconvenient that all of Avery's friends and family members end up dating the Hawthorne family as well. It was just a little bit too neat for me that they all kind of like end up in the same circle and she gets to be with her sister and her best friend and everything and everybody gets to be with a Hawthorne, and I just didn't really find that ending satisfying to me. But besides that, I really did enjoy the plot twists. I like the closure we got with some of the characters, and quite honestly, I know that there are more books. I believe there's another book that comes after this one that just kind of has like perspective of Grayson and Jameson. I did purchase the book that has all the little novellas of stories from other characters' perspectives, which I'm excited for. I'm not really sure that the story with Grayson and Jameson is needed, but I haven't decided if I was going to read it or not. I did see some reviews of people saying that they did not think it was worth reading, so I may just skip, but I'm not sure yet. The next book I read was Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I have been making my way through her backlog this year. I really enjoy her writing. She's an Instabuy writer for me. I will say I gave Love on the Brain 3.75 stars out of 5. I just didn't feel like I could give it a 4, but it wasn't really a 3.5. I did enjoy it. I just don't think it was my favorite book. I did not really love how willfully obtuse and oblivious the female main character was, but I did like the slow burn. It's a really good slow burn. There's a lot of good build there. I did enjoy the story between them. I liked that there was a really nice payoff at the end of the story because it's been building since day one. The plot did get a little wild towards the end of the book with one of the characters being like absolutely off the rails, but I did think it was fun. I did think it was something interesting that maybe some people could have seen coming, but I certainly didn't. Overall, I would recommend this book if you're looking for something fun to read, if you like STEM, if you're into a romance, if you don't mind a little bit of spice, if you love yourself some Ali Hazelwood, then I still recommend that you pick up this book and read it. So the next book that I read was Emily Henry's People We Meet on Vacation. I am also trying to read through her backlog. I do enjoy her books as well. She's not an Instabuy author for me, but I do gravitate towards her writing style and her characters. People We Meet on Vacation, I think, is one of my lower rated Emily Henry books. I, upon first reading it, gave it a 4.25 out of 5 stars, but after reading it and reflecting and since reading other Emily Henry books, I do think it's lower. Maybe I would give it like a 3-star. I found the characters just a little bit insufferable. I think I did enjoy the story of growth, or the perception of growth that they give us. I do think that the characters are written realistically. I don't believe that they're written to be likable. I think they're supposed to be morally gray and have problems that we watch them work through. And I think in the end, they're still not perfect, but they're trying to work on their problem and they're acknowledging that there is a problem. So I did like that aspect. And I will say that the dual timeline kept my interest, and I did find that the slow burn was diabolical. It was such a good slow burn, and the spice was really spicy without being explicit. There were aspects that I really liked about the book. I just found the characters to be kind of frustrating sometimes. I was kind of confused by some of the decisions that they made, but overall, not a bad read. I think it's so weird. I would still recommend the Emily Henry book to you, but just go into it knowing that Emily Henry books are really hit or miss for people, and I have watched so many other YouTubers talk about their Emily Henry rankings, and I might find somebody that I disagree with every single one of their rankings, but then someone else who maybe 1 through 3 I agree with, and then the bottom ones I do not. Or my favorite Emily Henry book getting ranked last for someone else and my least favorite getting ranked first for someone else. I think it's very personal how you take and interpret her writing, and that leads to different rankings for people. So even though upon reflection I didn't enjoy this one, I definitely would not let that scare you from picking this one up. Okay, next is The Favorites by Lynn Fargo. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked the pacing of the book. I thought it was really exciting. I thought the plot was intriguing. I loved the way that the writing was set up, as if we were watching a documentary, but like reading the documentary as it was being made or aired. I am a huge fan of like reality television, so books that kind of model a reality TV show or have a lot of like drama, just get messy and gossipy. I really enjoy reading that. I don't particularly like to indulge in those kinds of behaviors in my personal life, but I am a human being and nosy, and I just like knowing things. So if I can find an outlet to sort of indulge that side of myself, I really enjoy it. However, I really found the characters kind of lackluster. I did not really enjoy Heath. I thought that the relationship was quite strange. I guess I just really didn't understand the characters. Like, I did understand the characters, but I also didn't. And I think that the plot point where Heath and Bella have sex behind the main character's back, and then she gets pregnant, and then they become like, not really a throuple, but they kind of all live happily ever after in the end while they simultaneously raise the child as like a trio. I don't know. The ending didn't work for me, and I really feel like the kid thing was super unnecessary, but that's just my opinion. Overall, I think it's a good read, but I don't really think you're missing anything if you don't pick it up. So yeah. The final book I read in the month of February was Happily Never After by Lynn Painter. I gave this a 2.75 out of 5 stars. I'm not sure that Lynn Painter is for me. I've read like 3 or 4 of her books, and I find them enjoyable, but super not memorable. I know that in this one, I did enjoy the fact that we got to see them attend other weddings, and I will say that it was a fast read. It's kind of just like, if you're looking for something to read, you don't really want to use a lot of brain power, you want it to be easy to follow but still fun, I would pick this book up. It was pretty fast-paced, and I do think that the male lead comes across as like a little bit desperate, or he comes on a little too strong because he falls pretty fast for the female lead. But overall it was okay, and I guess after reading this one, I'm not sure if I'll keep continuing to read Lynn Painter. The first book I read in the month of March was Honey by Isabel Banta, or Banta, I'm not sure. It was a debut book. I got it through Book of the Month, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I think this was very just okay for me. I'm not a critic, so I don't feel comfortable saying my more critical opinions of books in general, but I will say that this one kind of just didn't do it for me. I felt that the book was very up or down. The pacing was very slow then fast. I feel like the book ended with a lot more that needed to be shown or said. The first half of the book really drug on, but the second half was super fast. and we kind of squished a lot in the back end. I also felt like the main character was said to have grown, but we weren't really shown the growth. We were just kind of told that there was growth, and there's an entire chunk of her career that we didn't even get to explore. I don't know. I would not recommend picking this one up. I think it was a little bit hard for me to get through, and there's not really much that I found memorable. Next, I read Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really wanted to like it more. And honestly, a 4.5 star is a great rating. I will say though that I did have it 5 stars upon initially finishing, and then upon writing my review of it in my reading journal, I found that I was leaning more towards 4.5. I really liked the characters. I found both of them very likable. I enjoyed their chemistry. I thought the story was good. As always, the writing was great. As always, the spice was good. I will say that for this being a BDSM focused book, I personally didn't think that we leaned very heavy into the BDSM aspect. I understand that this was more of like an introductory, dipping my toe in kind of thing for her in terms of writing BDSM or kink into her books. But I do think in even Ali Hazelwood's other books, there are some spicier or more kink focused spice that was better. And I'm not saying that I thought that the BDSM aspect was not good or wasn't fairly represented, because I think it was on both of those counts. I just feel like this book was hyped up as a BDSM representation type book, and I felt it was a little bit lacking on that. I have read books that are non-kink focused, and the spice was still more BDSM heavy than this one. So that's just a personal nitpick though, and that's the only reason I docked it. I don't really think it took away from the story. It was just me being super specific. So I do still think you should pick up the book. I really enjoyed it overall. The next book I read was a library book I picked out because I have been trying to read more books from the library this year, and it was called The Breakup Artists, and it's by Adriana Mather. It is a young adult novel, and I gave this one a 2.5 stars. I did not like this book at all. I actually soft DNF'd it for a couple weeks and then picked it back up to finish it because it was due. I found the story annoying. I found the characters really immature. I do think that some of that lends to it being a YA novel, but the concept itself was really intriguing, and there was some aspects that I liked where we talk about grief and how that's experienced in teenagers and how that might change the family dynamic, and how hard it is to kind of be in a transformative part of your life like that and be dealing with something as heavy as grief, and how friendships can change. So overall, it was kind of just like a miss for me, but I am glad that I picked it up and gave the author a try. Next up, I read Love Interest by Claire Gilmore. I found this book really fun. I was a little bit tricked, I guess, going into the book because I thought it was a romance, and it is a romance. But I would say it was also more of a literary fiction with romance in it, because at times it felt like the plot was way more focused on things other than the romance. But overall, I thought it was good. It was a slow burn, and I do think that there were parts of the book that felt like they drug on a little longer than they needed to, but I really did enjoy the dreamy aspects of the writing. I did like the characters. I liked the bond and the chemistry between the two. I liked that it felt natural. I liked that there was growth. And I also really enjoyed that the male lead was Korean, because I'm half Korean, and I feel like I don't see a lot of books where the characters are Korean or where the male lead is Korean, so that was really exciting for me, and I suggest that you give it a try. The last book I read in the month of March was The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. I think I rated this a 4-star, even though I don't really know whether it's okay to rate memoirs. I don't really rate memoirs kind of under the same criteria that I rate my other books. I more rate memoirs on a 1 through 5 ranking based on how I felt reading it, and I felt that this was overall a good reading experience. I will say lots of trigger warnings. If you choose to read The Glass Castle, you absolutely should look into the trigger warnings before reading that book. It is a memoir about Jeanette Walls's life growing up very poor with parents who quite obviously suffer from mental illness. And there are a lot of themes in there that I won't say out loud for fear of my video getting banned, but they're not good things that should be happening to children, and it was a hard read, but I do think it's poignant. I do think that if it's something you can handle, you should read it. I really find that as I'm expanding my interest as a reader and trying to grow as a reader, I find that it's important to branch out and read things from perspectives that you have never lived through or never considered a possibility. And I do think that, unfortunately, I identify with some of the things that she went through, and as strange as it may seem to others who have no experience, it is kind of comforting and validating to read, unfortunately, that people have gone through similar atrocities throughout their lives. So I would say if you can handle it, absolutely you should read this book, but proceed with caution and make sure that you give yourself breaks and be very gentle while reading it. In the month of April, it was a slower reading month for me. I only read 2 books, one of them being Beach Read by Emily Henry and the other one being Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. Done and Dusted by Lila Sage, I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. I felt that it was cute. It was fun, you know. It's a nice read. It's easy. Her writing is fun. She does a lot of like silly banter between her characters. I'm not gonna lie, I do find the interconnected romantic series, small town kind of thing to be a little tiresome. And by that I mean, the first book is about Clementine, and she comes back to town and falls in love with her brother's best friend who works on their ranch and grew up with them, and he's the owner of the local bar. I just really don't like that the next book kind of focuses on someone else in that circle, and then the book following that is, you know, Clementine's best friend and her brother, and then the book after that is another character. I think it's similar to Chestnut Springs, which I did love as a series, but sometimes I find the trope of best friends getting together with siblings or other best friends in an interconnected series to be a little bit tiresome. It's a little predictable and cliche, and I don't find them that exciting. So, for example, in Chestnut Springs, the book that is based on Cade and Willa, I did not enjoy because it felt a little predictable. The first book focuses on Summer and Rhett, and Cade is Rhett's brother and Willa is Summer's best friend. So to me, it's just kind of like, we couldn't think of any other characters to put together. And that's a very personal thing. I know a lot of people enjoy those kinds of tropes and I guess relationships within interconnected series, but for me, I just didn't really enjoy it. So the Lila Sage books were fun and I didn't have a problem reading them, and I probably will finish the series. But it did feel very reminiscent of Chestnut Springs, and I can already see that Clementine's best friend is going to end up with her brother. They're like setting it up already 3 books ahead, and I just didn't really enjoy that aspect of it. Like I mentioned, the second book I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I did give this one a 5 stars. I do think that this is probably my favorite Emily Henry book that I've read so far. I really enjoy the characters. I feel like Augustus really stuck with me as a male lead. I did find January to be a little annoying at times, but I do think that some of that is excused by her circumstances. I enjoyed that the book traverses grief and we get to see kind of messier leads who have a lot of mental health things going on, and although at first they're a little bit hesitant to share, throughout the book you see their growth and we get to really see inside of their minds and how they're thinking and feeling and the way that they communicate that to the other person. I also really enjoyed the ending where it wasn't super clean and happy. There's just this idea that they're going to try and make things work, but they don't really know what that's going to look like or if it will work. I will say that I definitely recommend this book. In the month of May, I read 5 books, and it was quite a strange month because I was all over the place with my picks. First, I started out with Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I gave this one a 5-star as well. I got this from my local library, so unfortunately I could not annotate it, and that made me very sad because it was an incredible book. It was my first Abby Jimenez book, and if I'm being quite honest, I'm a little bit scared to keep reading her books because of how good this one was and how much I enjoyed it. I am terrified that the others will not stack up. I will say the only complaint I had about this book was that the female lead character was making me so angry. I was getting so irritated with the choices that she kept making, and I know by the end of the book she has like this whole arc and she comes back around and we have a big reuniting, but the choices she made in the meantime were just really infuriating, and I kind of understood where she was coming from, but also I spent a lot of time like yelling at the book about how immature she was acting. So it was still enjoyable though. I will say I really liked this book, and I think that if you've not read Abby Jimenez, this is the only book I read of hers, but I would recommend you start there. The next book I read was The Shadows We Hide by Alan Eskins. This is a sequel to The Lies We Bury by him, and it follows a guy named Joe who is, upon continuation of the previous story, trying to solve the what he thinks was murder of his father. The book was okay. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think this is very out of my wheelhouse. I read it because I was part of a book club, and these were the books that they had picked, so I was thankful that it took me out of my wheelhouse. I do think Alan Eskins is a strong writer. A lot of his stuff is based around like criminal cases and things like that because he is a lawyer. Overall, I do think it was a good read. I'm not really sure what the vibes of everybody watching this are, so I would say if you're into true crime or mysteries, detective books, maybe crime novels that have to do with a little bit of like lawyerese, then you should pick this one up. He's a very strong writer. The story is really great, but be forewarned that you will absolutely hate the main character because he acts like he does not have a singular brain cell most of the time, though thankfully everything seems to work out for him in the end. The next book I read was Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was a personal read for me, just something that I wanted to explore. I have my own mental health issues I'm actively working on in my life, and I found that sometimes reading material that I think is relatable to me helps me, and this is exactly what this book did. I don't know that this is something I would recommend to everybody because it's very specific, but if it's something that you feel that you can relate to, then you may get something out of it. I found it very validating, I found it enlightening, and I thought that it is an important read if you feel that this is something you have experienced or are struggling with. The next book I read this month was The 100 Lives of Juliet by Evelyn Skye. I will say this is a 5-star read. I did not give it 5 stars immediately upon finishing the book, and I could not figure out why I did not give it a 5-star. But after reflecting for a little while, I really landed on the fact that this is absolutely without question a 5-star. I'm speechless, to be quite honest. I've never read a book like this before. It's about Romeo and Juliet in their first life and then every life after in which they've encountered each other. And their love story is now taking place modern day. I found the writing very beautiful. I absolutely loved getting to see the different lives of Romeo and Juliet. I loved every minute of this book, quite frankly. I think it's one of those books where you're left with that rare feeling after you've finished it that you wish you could just erase your memory and read it all over again for the first time. I do think that in the future I will go back and read it when I'm a little bit fuzzier about the details of the book, just so I can experience it again. It does have a very captivating love story. There are some strong lessons, I guess, that are touched on throughout the book, and the afterword by the author made me bawl my eyes out. So I really highly recommend. If there is, you know, only a handful of books that you walk away from this video with a list saying, hey, these are the books I want to take away from it, it has to be this one. I absolutely adored this story. I think about it a lot, and I think that everybody should read this book. The last book I read this month was The Lion Women of Tehran, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It is a story about 2 women, and the timeline is dual timeline, so you get some flashbacks and you get some modern day. These 2 women grew up together in Iran and they went through the revolution together. One of them left for America and the other one stays in Iran, and the story just kind of follows them from then to now and all of the things that they've gone through as women in Iran. And I found this story incredibly important. I think it's fictional, but obviously not too far of a stretch of the things that actually happen to the women in Iran every single day. And I do not know much about Iran. My knowledge is maybe a little bit more than your usual person, but a lot less than you should be. But I thought it was really interesting to learn more about Persian Farsi. The author does use the language in the book and explains to you what the terms mean. I thought it was interesting to learn about the history of Iran. I found the culture really compelling. I thought it was a really beautiful story about 2 women and the things that they've gone through, and I think it was somber to read, and I felt a little bit bitter at the end of the book because although the characters in the book are not real, like I mentioned already, it's not a stretch from what the women who live in these types of societies deal with, and it's really sad to think that there are women in Iran who are fighting for their right to exist as women every single day, and the character in the book was fighting her entire life, I believe like 70 plus years, for women's freedom and equality, and by the end of the book she's still fighting, and it's the year 2025, and unfortunately even in real life women in Iran are fighting for their right to exist as women without oppressive systems. And I recognize that this isn't something that only the women in Iran are experiencing, but obviously to read this snapshot of Iranian women, it just felt like one of those moments where you can't help but be grateful for what you do have, even if it's not perfect, and also one of those kinds of books that makes you feel a little bit smaller in the world, and I actually like that feeling. Almost done. We have 2 more months to get through. Next was the month of June. I read 5 books again. So the first book I read in the month of June was Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. It is the 2nd book in her Rebel Blue Ranch series. This book is about Clementine's brother and him and his relationship with Ada, who is an interior designer that is helping redo the big barn on their property. I thought it was, again, very fast and fun. I thought that their banter was kind of cute, but overall the storyline felt a little bit shallow, and the cowboy, country boy character was a little bit overdone. It felt kind of stereotyped and too on the nose for me. Again, I'm really on the fence. I do already have the 3rd book in this series, so I think I may read it, and I am a little bit of a completionist, so I might see it through to the end, but it's really not my favorite cowboy romance series. I don't think it does anything for me. I know that a lot of people do enjoy this series, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think that I just look for something a little bit different in my cowboy romances, and this series just really isn't delivering that for me. The next book I read was The Duke and I by Julia Quinn, and it is better known as Bridgerton now. It is the original series that the Bridgerton show was based on. I have seen a few people do reads through the entire series before watching the show or while watching the show, and I really do enjoy the show, so I figured I may as well also read the books and see how I like it. I will say that I do enjoy the books more than I like the show, and that's kind of crazy because I love the show. I just found that, first of all, Miss Julia Quinn, yes, absolutely. This woman knows how to write a romance. Oh my gosh, it is beautiful. It is achingly beautiful. I found the writing to be really good. I found the story to be really interesting. I found it super easy to read. I flew through it. I really loved re-entering the world of Bridgerton, and I think the characters, for obvious reasons, are able to be like more in-depth, more rounded. You get a lot more of the story. There are some aspects that are different from the show, but a lot that are similar. I think the only thing that I really noted about the book was that I think Simon's attitude sucks so bad, but it is period appropriate for him to kind of be a little bit of a misogynist. And I did not enjoy in the books how the storyline between Simon and his dad was wrapped up, and I also think the books goes a little bit more in depth about the Daphne and Simon situation, which, trigger warning, has some kind of themes that are a little bit harder to handle for some people. And I really think in the book I did not enjoy the light that it painted Daphne in, for good reason, but I just found her a little bit more of a harder character to swallow in book form. Overall, I really am excited to continue the series, and I gave the first book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Breakup Pact by Emma Lord. I also got this from the library, and I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. This was a dud for me. I really thought the synopsis of the book sounded super interesting. It's about two exes who end up kind of smashed together because both of their exes publicly like dumped them, and they both went viral for it. There is a little bit of grief being touched on in the book, but I think the main thing that kept these two apart is a miscommunication, which lasts for like 10 years. There are some cute moments, but overall, I just don't think the plot worked for me. I found the main lead a little bit insufferable, and I don't know, I couldn't really get into it. The exes never paid for what they did, and every time I read the review for this book in my journal, I think, what book is that? I did not read that book. And then I Google the synopsis of the book, and then I'm like, oh, I did read that book. So that's kind of telling for me. Yeah, I don't recommend that one. The next book was another library book. It is called The Banned Bookshop of Maggie Banks. It's written by Shauna Robinson, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I liked this book. I did put it down after the first chapter and came back to it a couple days later. I just don't think I was in the right space to read the book, and not for any reason other than I was feeling a little slumpy. So when I decided to finally pick it up because I had to go back to the library, I did read through it and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun book. It was really interesting. The writing style took some getting used to, but once you kind of got into and used to the writer's style, it was really good to read. I thought the plot was interesting. There's like a little bit of a mystery there, which I thought was really fun. And yeah, I just really thought it was a good book. It was a good read. It wrapped up very nicely, so if you're looking for a book about women and their love for books and bookstores, and also a little bit of a mystery that kind of has to do with historical facts about like a small town, then maybe you should check it out. The last book I read in the month of June was another library book, and it was Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I gave this a 4.75 out of 5 stars. I really liked this book. It's just that. There's nothing too deep about it. It's kind of one of those books where you don't really need a lot of brain power to read, and I mean that in a good way. Sometimes you're not really interested in like a deep plot or learning lessons or solving a mystery or dealing with the exhaustion of getting into like a fantasy realm, and you just kind of want something that you pick up, you read it, it's not that deep, but it's fun and it's flirty and you like the characters, and that was this book for me. I have not read Annabelle Monaghan before, so this was the first book of hers that I have read, and I liked it enough that I'm willing to try another one of her books. There was a classic third act breakup in this book, which I think absolutely could have been avoided, but you know, it is what it is. I still liked the ending. It's really sweet, and it is about a recently divorced mom of 2 who allows a film crew to film a movie on her property. She sold the rights to her book about her life to be made into a movie, and the male lead in this book is the actor playing her husband in the film. So if that sounds interesting to you, then I recommend you pick it up. Okay, the last month of books we have arrived. It was the month of July, and I read 6 books. The month of July was a stacked reading month for me. I absolutely enjoyed reading. I think I read so well in the month of July that I'm actually in a little bit of a slump right now. We're about halfway through the month and I still haven't, I've read 1 book. Anyway, getting into it, the first book I read in the month of July was Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This was a 5-star for me. I don't write reviews on books on like Goodreads or Fable, but I wrote a review on this book on my Fable and I just loved it. I found the writing dense, which isn't a bad thing. I think it just took a long time to get through the book. I'm kind of a fast reader, but this book took me a little while to get through because it just felt like everything he says is so important and meaningful to the story, and there's so much packed into the text, and every paragraph is saying 100 different things in those words, and so I just felt like this is the kind of book where you should prepare yourself to take a while with it. You do need time to digest and process what is happening, and the writing style itself was so beautiful. It's very poetic the way he writes. It almost feels like you're reading prose instead of a book, and I also felt like most pages, almost every page I would argue, has like a mic drop moment where you end a paragraph with something just so, I don't know, resonant that it feels like he's dropping a microphone, and that happens so many times in the book and it never gets old. I felt like this book buried itself in my chest. It is so haunting and it makes you ache, and it's trigger warning. There are some things you should look up. Again, I won't go in depth about what is in the book, but you should look up the trigger warnings for this book. I found it quite triggering. I think that it's something that if you can read, you should, because the way that he writes about these things very much feels like he is not writing it from a male perspective. He either knows people in his life who have experienced these things or went out of his way to find people who have experienced things and ask them about their perspective. And maybe, hopefully not, he could be writing from a place of experience as well. And it's handled so gently, but also very accurately. And I think the feelings that he evokes and the way that he describes the aftermath of some of these traumatic events are very real. And I really enjoyed that he did not shy away from those things. I also think that there's a lot of questions about society and how we handle harassment and how we handle this societal idea that boys will be boys, and the idea of protecting men who do bad things because they are important to the community or important to their jobs, and what happens when you pick a side and it's the wrong one, and what that means for you as a person who knowingly picks the wrong side. And I think that I'm really intrigued to see where the rest of this series goes. I wanted to immediately pick up the second one, but I knew I needed to give myself a mental break before going back into that world. But overall, I think the writing and story was incredible, and I absolutely believe that the rest of the series is going to knock it out of the park for me and probably be one of my favorites that I've ever read. The next book I read was another library book called 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was recommended by Lexi Nova on YouTube. I trust her recommendations with my whole heart, and I picked up 2 of these books this month because of her recommendations, and she absolutely nailed it. I love this story. I think the writing style was great. The story was beautiful, and it's about a love story over time, and it also really deeply focuses on the characters, their growth as characters, and kind of tries to highlight the lives that some people are unfortunately born into, or the situations that they're thrust into, and the decisions they make based on their environment and upbringing, and how they handle the outcomes of those decisions. I think there's some important messaging here about privilege and circumstances that you can't help, and I really think it's a good exploration about how childhood and trauma can shape you, both positively and negatively. And the main female character deals with chronic migraines, which is a debilitating condition. And I thought that that was really cool to see that kind of representation, because you don't often read about characters who are disabled in one way or another, and certainly don't see them fronting like a romance novel. So I thought that was really cool too. The next book I read was The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith. I gave this a 3 stars. I just don't think it's for me. I'm really not a huge fantasy reader, and if I were to read fantasy, I definitely don't think my first pick would be fairies. So I'm of the era where when I was a kid, The Changeling was a big movie, the one with Angelina Jolie, and stories about like fairies and things were out, and I was a little bit of a superstitious kid. I'm still a superstitious adult. I have OCD. So the things that I heard about fairies, I just scared me off of them. I find them a little bit intense. I definitely feel like fairies scare me. So I found this book a little bit scary to read, if I'm being 100% honest, but it was interesting. I thought the concept was cool. I don't know, I couldn't really get into it, and that's like of no fault to the book or the author at all. I just don't think that fairies are my thing. So I would suggest, if you're into fairies and you're looking for a new fantasy world to get into, this one's quite exciting. But other than that, I don't really have any notes. The next 3 books I read were Legendborn, Bloodmarked, and Oathbound, which are 3 books out of the 4 in a series by Tracy Deonn called Legendborn. Listen, I'm not gonna say a ton about this series, because if I do, I'm gonna end up sitting here filming for another hour. I love this series. I love this series. I love this series. I love Tracy Deonn. I'm in love with you. I'm in love with your characters. I'm in love with this world that you have built. And I love Lexi Nova because she recommended this series for people who are, it's from her video, I'll link it down below. That's where I got some of these recommendations from, but she did some specific recs, and one of them was like, you're not a fantasy reader, but you want to get into fantasy, and she listed like 2 recommendations for some fantasy worlds that are a little bit easier to kind of step into as like intro fantasy, and they're both YA, but I really enjoyed this series. It's about this girl named Bree, and she is going to a college fresh off of the death of her mother, and she thinks that there's some weird stuff happening and she doesn't really understand it, so she seeks to try and get into that world more to understand, because she believes it may be linked to her mother's death. And the trilogy just follows her journey through that magical world. I'm not going to talk about anything past the synopsis of the first one because I don't want to 100% spoil what happens in the second and third. And I say that because I'm not usually a spoiler-free kind of person. I only go to watch reviews of books because I'm trying to see how that person felt about them. So I want to know the spoilers and plot points. I want to know how it made them feel. I don't like the vague reviews. But some of you may be in the middle of the series as you're watching this, and I don't want you to have anything spoiled for you, so I will not say anything in depth about it. I will just say the characters are lovely. The world is incredible. The magic system is unlike anything I've ever read about before. I love that the author is Black. I love that the main character is Black. I love that part of the magic system is rooted in deep African American roots and tradition. I love there are talks about oppression and culture. I think it's a YA novel, so there's only so much that you can put into it, but I do think that it's touched on really well. I like the idea that there is racism and prejudice in the book because those are, and even microaggressions, because those are things that people deal with on a daily basis, so I don't think that we should just not be writing about it. I do love the characters that stand up for our main character, Bree. I love the characters that learn that they have some privilege that they were not aware of. I like the characters that are learning about internal misogyny or internal racism, and I think everything about this series is great. From top to bottom, front to back, incredible, and I cannot wait for the fourth and final installment of the book. The only thing I will say is, the two things I will say is, one, be forewarned that the length of these books is lengthy. I know that makes no sense, but the first book is under 500 pages, and then the second book is 500, 600 some pages, and then the last book is 700 pages. Those are the longest books I have ever read. When I picked up Oathbound and it was this big, I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be reading this forever. No, I read these books so quickly. I stayed up all night. I literally did not sleep until 3 or 4 in the morning because I was finishing the book. I would read these books in 200-page spurts because it's just too good to put down. So that's my second warning. The first warning is they're long, so don't be shocked when you pick them up. The second warning is you will not sleep. You will not put down this book. You will not escape this world. You will not spend any second after reading not thinking about this world or these characters or lamenting the fact that it's probably going to be another year and a half before we get another installment. So that's a 5-star series. I don't even have to read the fourth book to know. It's a 10-star series. I literally absolutely love this. It's incredible. I will recommend it to every single person ever on the planet, even if they don't read fantasy, because I don't read fantasy and I fell absolutely head over heels with this. I am so sad that I have not seen more people talk about it. This is literally my Roman Empire. I will never shut up about it, and I think it is the perfect way to end my reading wrap up for the first part of the year. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for joining me and going through the 30 books that I have read this year. I hope that you found this enjoyable. I hope that maybe you got some recommendations from it. I know I was a little bit light on the summary of the books and more heavy on just my thoughts. So if you'd rather me be a little bit more in depth with the summary of the book or plot points to make it easier for you to make a decision or for you to know more about the books, then please let me know. I'm somebody who kind of just finds something and picks it up and reads it. I don't really read synopsis for books anymore when I go into them, so that's just how I kind of present my reviews. But if you guys want something different, let me know. I hope that you enjoyed being here with me. I hope that you liked some of the books that I read. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these, and if you have, whether your thoughts and ratings were similar to mine or dissimilar, and why. And I really hope to see you in the next one. So, bye!